وأكرر معلومات بس يعني للتنبيه. النهارده معانا إلا وكوبي من جامعة كاليفورنيا. عشان ما اطولش عليكم برضه السيشن هتتقسم لجزئين، إلا هتشرح فيها الجزء بتاع الريسيرش نفسه ان انت ازاي تقدر تدور على المعلومات، وكوبي هيتكلم عن الجزء بتاع الكتابه اللي انت هتبدا فيه ان انت تعمل البحث بتاعك انت. هيبقى في بريك في النص ان شاء الله برضه عشان اللي حابب يعمل اي حاجه وعشان الصلاه كمان، وفي الاخر خالص هيبقى في مجال للاسئله سواء كان في محتوى السيشن او لو حد حابب يسال إلا وكوبي عن حاجه في خبرتهم الاكاديميه. اللي حابب يعرف الاثنين اندر جراد نيورو ساينس في جامعه UCLA. وهقدم بقى في الإنجليزي عشان الناس فينا أجانب معانا إن شاء الله في السيشن. Hello everyone and good morning, good afternoon or good evening depending on where we are on this planet. I'm Ammar Yasser, the Vice President of the team, and it's a pleasure to meet you all today. Probably you know the details of this webinar session, but just let you know, today we have Ella and Coby from UCLA, undergraduate students who have amazing experience in the scientific research. The session will be divided in two parts. The first part will be presented by Ella, talking about the researching method and collecting data for the research. Coby will talk about the writing your research itself in correct way. In the end of the session, we will have a Q&A if you wanted to ask about anything related to today's session or anything other related to Coby or Ella and their academic experience. It's a pleasure again to meet you all, and you can start now.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me? Can I get confirmation maybe in the chat that my mic's working? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. I have some slides. Sorry, I don't usually use Teams. So I put a document in the chat for you guys with some extra notes on it. I can't cover everything today in one meeting, but that has some extra details on there. Yeah, but thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to telling you guys more about scientific writing. It's exciting that you all are already interested in neuroscience. You're definitely way ahead of me when I was in high school. But let me see. This is not working. Oh, okay, I just have to click. So just a little bit about me. Yeah, as mentioned, my name is Ella. I'm from a city about an hour away from Los Angeles, so I'm still pretty local. But I'm a neuroscience major. I'm a senior, so this is actually my last week. I'm almost graduated. But on campus, I work in a lab. I study pain and addiction, and I work with cells. And this is my lab partner, Coby. You guys will get to meet him a little later. We're pretty good friends. But in my free time, I spend a lot of time dancing. So that's what I like to do. Oh, and this is my boss's dog. I just like putting pictures of him on here. So just to give you guys a bit of an overview of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to explain first what a review is, what makes it different from other kinds of papers, choosing a topic, how to find your sources. I have some helpful websites and resources that I like to use, and then just a little bit about how to find them and how to read them. So just to start off, what is a review? I'm sure many of you have some experience with them, but we'll just recap quickly. So a review is an official scientific paper that's main focus is to just summarize and analyze recent research in one specific research area. They don't do their own experiment. They don't try to make any sort of argument. They just summarize other research. They're very important because so much research is published every single day that it would be impossible to keep up with everything. And it's also a really easy way to catch up with modern research on a topic. If you're a beginner or you're a scientist from a different field that doesn't know much, reviews are a good way to get familiar with new topics. Most scientists read them. I read them all the time. I go through a lot of reviews, but whether you're an expert or a student, you're going to end up reading reviews at some point. So they're good to be familiar with. So as I kind of mentioned, reviews are not studies. You're not doing any sort of experiment, and you're not writing about just one study. And you're also not trying to answer any sort of question. You're just summarizing. It's also not a research paper or an essay, so you're going to use formal, objective, scientific language. You're not trying to make any sort of argument, and you're not supposed to have any sort of real opinion, just fact. Okay. So just to kind of elaborate on that, for a study, the research question is going to be something very specific because you're doing an experiment. For example, if you're analyzing the dopamine circuits in certain brain areas, that would be a research question. For an essay, you make some sort of argument, you take an opinion. But for a review, your research question every single time is going to be, what have we recently learned about your topic? So at least that's easy. You don't have to come up with a new research question every time. You already know what it's going to be. So this is just a review that I found on the internet. It's not better or worse than any other ones. It happened to be the first one I click on, but you can see that there's a very descriptive title that tells you exactly what the review is going to be about. Then there's the abstract, which always comes first. It's the first section, and it's basically just a short summary of the paper that's full of keywords and important topics that are going to be covered in the review. By the way, I can't see the chat, so if anybody has like an important question or I suddenly cut out, somebody can just unmute themselves and let me know because I can't see messages. But anyway, the next section will be the introduction, where you kind of set up the rest of your paper and give background on why you're even writing. And then the main part of your essay is going to be the body. So that's where you're actually going to go through and analyze all of the research that you found and read. Subtitles are usually helpful to keep everything organized. And then you're going to finish up with your conclusions and then list all of your sources at the very end in the reference section. So choosing a topic obviously is the first thing you're going to have to do, but it's also one of the most important steps. So when you're trying to think of what to write about, I'm sure many of you already have topics that you're very interested in. So those are definitely the best ones to write about, right? You want to write about something you're interested in. And you also want to make sure that it's related to your field and what you study. If you guys don't currently work in any sort of neuroscience field, then it doesn't really matter so much what it is you write about. But for me, as somebody who works with pain and addiction, it wouldn't make very much sense for me to write a review about Alzheimer's disease, just because that's not something I know much about. But for you guys, it doesn't really matter too much. You can read up and research no matter what topic you want. It's also important to make sure that you pick something important, right? It takes a long time to write a review, and you want to make sure that your efforts are worth your time. So you want to make sure you choose a topic that's important and it's actually going to help other scientists in the field. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, you want to make sure you pick something that's specific. So if you pick something too broad, you'll end up writing a book instead of a review paper. You want to keep it short. So we'll go into more detail on that. So here's just some examples. If I was trying to pick a topic for a review and my topic was addiction, just addiction, that's way too broad, right? People spend their entire lives studying addiction and they still don't learn everything. So you definitely can't fit that into a review paper. So what might be slightly better would be if you get more specific and you say alcohol addiction, but that's still a super broad field. And again, people spend their entire lives studying alcohol addiction. The best option would be to get even more specific and say, how does alcohol addiction disrupt sleep, for example? So you have one specific problem, one specific area you're addressing, and you should be able to fit that into one review paper. So just to kind of show that point, these are from PubMed. It's like a database. If you aren't familiar, it has a lot of different studies on it. But if I type in just the word addiction, you can see that there's almost 150,000 results that you're going to have to filter through in order to find sources. Versus if you type in alcohol addiction and sleep, you can see there's only like 2,000 results, which is still a lot. You're still going to have to go through them, but it's way more manageable than 150,000. So that's something to keep in mind when you're choosing a topic. Remember, the point of a review is to do a quick summary of recent research. If it's way too long, then it kind of defeats the point of reading the review because you want to be quick. So once you've chosen your topic, you can start the research process. I will say that the researching is most of the review writing process. This is what you're going to spend the most time on. So it's important to make sure you find good sources. Just some general notes about sources when you're looking for them. You want to keep it recent. Most people are familiar with research from decades ago. You know, if you find a paper that was published in 1980, chances are most people have read that, most people are familiar with it. So you want to keep it pretty modern. I would say maybe like 3 years. It's not really a hard number. If you find something from 5 years ago that's really important, like you can include that. It doesn't really matter too much. You just want to make sure it's fairly recent for your field. You also want to make sure you keep it relevant. As tempting as it might be to include information that's really interesting but not super related to your topic, you're going to want to keep it very specific to what you're writing about. And then lastly, you want to make sure you're concise. If you have a word count, maybe you're writing a review as part of an assignment and there's instructions, you may have to leave stuff out or not go into as much detail just to fit within your length requirements. So then when you're choosing sources, there's 4 things you want to keep in mind. As I mentioned, you want to make sure it's recent. Reading old research can be really helpful for your understanding, especially if you're not super familiar with the topic, but you don't want to cite that and include that in your review. You also want to make sure most of what you are citing are studies. It's okay to cite a few other reviews, but the bulk of your sources should be actual experimental studies. Otherwise, you're not really reviewing anything. You're kind of just summarizing other people's summaries, which is not nearly as helpful. You also want to make sure that your sources are actually research. Textbooks, news articles, things like that can be really interesting, and you'll probably end up running across some when you're researching, but you don't want to include these. You want to make sure that it's mostly studies and maybe a review or two. And then lastly, you want to make sure your sources are scientific. Is it published? Is it formal scientific writing? You don't want to get anything off of any sketchy websites that don't look trustworthy. So again, I'm sure you guys are familiar with studies and reviews and reading them, but just in case there's anybody who's fairly new to scientific literature, studies and reviews, when they are published, are submitted to journals. There's a ton of different journals. And then databases are big search engines that are able to look through all of the different journals. So databases are basically just like the Google of science research specifically. So there's a lot of different databases. Personally, I think PubMed is the most helpful. It's also one of the biggest ones. So I use that 99% of the time, but other people like different ones. So feel free to test them all out. Google Scholar is another really popular one. But these contain millions of articles all in one place, which make it really easy to find information. But I will warn you that not every journal is free. Some of them you have to pay for. So you are going to want to look for ones that say open access. I have this arrow right here. You can see this blue box. This is open access. That means it's free. Most universities provide like free access to these journals, but if you don't have access to it, don't pay for it. Just do the best with what you can find, or find a different source, because journals can get really expensive. You also want to make sure you don't just Google your resources. Anybody can post anything on the internet, right? You want to make sure that you're finding true, verified information. And you want to make sure that what you find is scientific and peer-reviewed, which means that it's been verified to be true. So again, here's some examples. So good sources, places to find things. PubMed, as I mentioned, Nature and the Journal of Neurological Sciences are both journals, very prestigious journals. So those are usually good. These are American websites, which I believe means most of the research is American, which is fine. Just so you know, you might not find that much international research on these ones. The National Library of Medicine and the American Psychological Association. Those are both really good resources, though. I look on there all the time. Sorry, 1 second. Forgive me, it's very noisy today. I'm trying to find a quiet place. Let me go back. Sorry, folks, I'm not used to Microsoft Teams. Okay, so some places that you don't want to look for sources are going to be websites like WebMD, Psychology Today, HuffPost. These are all kind of blog style websites where anybody can post anything. Wikipedia, although it's tempting, you don't want to cite it in a review. It's not considered very trustworthy. I'm not saying that these websites are necessarily false or that you're going to find false information. They're just not super appropriate for a scientific review. So then once you find a source and you want to determine if it should be included or not, you have to kind of see if it's trustworthy. So a good indication that you're looking at a study that's verified that you can include is if it has a list of authors that usually have MD or PhD degrees. It'll say in the title what their degree is. And then you want to see if it has those sections that we talked about at the beginning, right? An abstract, introduction, discussion, things like that. You want to make sure it's using formal scientific language. If there's a lot of slang or it doesn't sound very fancy, then that's probably not a study. And they usually have very descriptive titles as well. If you are looking at like an internet article that is maybe not as trustworthy, you're going to see informal language, usually one author and they don't have any degrees listed. If there's a comment section, that's an immediate no. If there's a comment section, you know that you're looking at just an internet article. And then if it's biased or it has any sort of informal title, and especially if it has a lack of citations, then you don't want to include that in your review. So just some helpful resources that I like to use when I'm writing. These are all optional. If you have something else that you prefer to use or you just don't want to mess with it, that's totally fine too. But I will put these out there for you guys. There's a lot of different softwares and websites that can make the whole process much easier, in my opinion. Whoops. Sorry, there we go. So the first one, and the one that I think is most helpful, are what are called paper management systems. They're these softwares, there's a bunch of different ones that you can download to your device, and they keep all of your sources in one place. So you don't have to have like 100 tabs open on your computer. They also find and keep track of all the citation information, and they'll generate citations for you, which I think saves so much time. They can take some time to get used to, but in my opinion, it pays off. I like Zotero, which is this one over here. It's free. I think they're both free. But there's a lot of information about these in that document that I put in the chat for you guys. So if you're interested in downloading a paper management system or learning how to use it, definitely check that document. These are some websites that are free and also very helpful. This one over here is called Connected Papers. If you have a study that you really like and you want to find more that are similar to it, you can put that study into this website and then it will make a little map like this that shows you other related papers. I actually haven't used that one. I just found out about it a couple months ago, but other people really like it. So definitely give it a try. Citation Machine will help you create citations if you don't want to use a paper management system. Free, super easy. And then Purdue OWL is a good place to find information on formatting and citation styles and things like that. All of the links for these are in that document. So then just a couple words on finding sources. If you're using a database like PubMed, for example, again, you can use any of them. I just happen to like PubMed, it's my favorite. But this isn't Google, so you don't want to type in a full question like you would if you're just Googling something casually. You want to aim for 1 to 3 keywords so that you can find the most information. There's also some more information about this in the document with ways to choose keywords and things that'll help you out. But here's an example. In PubMed on the left side, I typed out a full question. And you can see it found about 82,000 studies, which is a lot. But when I type in stress and brain, more simple, it pulls up almost double that amount. So you don't want to accidentally filter out an important article by typing too many words in the search bar. So try to keep it short. Okay, so then once you find all your sources and you have to cite them, There's many different formatting options. MLA, APA, and Chicago tend to be the most common formatting layouts. Most journals will specify which one they want. So if you know that you're going to submit your review to be published, you're going to want to check with the journal. Otherwise, if you're not going to submit it or you just aren't sure, APA is usually the safest option. It tends to be the most common and, in my opinion, the easiest. So like I said, those websites have a lot of information on that will help you figure out how to cite. And then if you use like a paper management software, it'll do it for you, which is really convenient. And then my last point is just reading the literature and how to understand these studies that you found. So just some general tips. Most of the review writing process is just reading. So you're going to spend the most amount of time reading and much less time actually writing anything. My biggest tip for writing a review is taking notes while you read. I can't even tell you how many times I read all my sources and then I go to take notes at the very end. But then the problem is you don't know which source had which information. So you start writing and then you have to end up rereading everything to figure out which sources you have to cite in which part. It's the worst. Don't do that. So definitely make sure that you're taking notes on each source while you're reading them. That way it'll be much easier for you at the end. So then once you have all of your notes on all of your sources that you've read, you can kind of compare them to see any common themes, any words that keep coming up, any trends in research, and that'll be much more helpful when you start writing an outline of your review. Coby's going to talk more about writing an outline and the general writing steps. He's actually writing a review right now for one of his classes, so you should definitely ask him about it. But in terms of just research, if you're working with a subject that you're not very familiar with, which I would imagine for most of you is probably the case if you choose a topic that's new, you can try reading some other reviews or even like a textbook just to gain a basic understanding for yourself before you start diving into studies. Sometimes it can be hard to understand studies if you don't know all of the terms or all of the methods that a field of neuroscience tends to use. So then when you're reading a study, the most useful sections are going to be the abstract, the discussion, and the conclusion. Usually these are the most reader-friendly. They have the easiest terms to understand. So the abstract is just a summary of the experiment. Usually when I find a study and I'm trying to decide if it's going to be helpful, I just read the abstract, because if the abstract doesn't talk about what you need, then don't include that study. There's no point in reading the rest of it. So abstracts are very helpful. The discussion section is also really important because it breaks down what the results actually tell us. You know, why is the study important? What did they find? And then the conclusion section kind of summarizes everything again and talks about future directions that we can go. The methods and the results section tend to be trickier. Don't worry if you don't totally understand these sections. I still don't understand every methods and results section that I read because these sections are generally written for scientists who know all about that topic and maybe are trying to replicate a similar experiment. The terms that are noteworthy to look for that you might want to keep an eye out for in the methods and results section are things like placebo-controlled, double-blind, random sample, the sample size, things like that, because these are all aspects that will help you evaluate the study and how strong or weak the conclusions are. And then lastly, you want to ask yourself, are these findings important? So if you look at the paper and it says something like, we found very strong evidence that this common chemical is linked to Alzheimer's, that's obviously very important. That's a very significant finding. But if you're reading a paper that says there's weak evidence that this one random protein could possibly have something to do with Alzheimer's, that's probably not as important. Somebody wouldn't be as interested in that research. So just to summarize, this is kind of the general process of researching for a review. First, you have to choose a topic, and then you've got to find your sources. And then the bulk of the time you spend is going to be reading and taking notes. And then after that, you can start writing your outline. And as Coby's going to discuss later, you can then start writing and editing. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have on the topic, but I'm happy to take questions. If anybody has questions specifically about the presentation or reviews, I'll be happy to take those first. And then later, if anybody has any questions on just anything else, I'll be happy to take those too.
اوكي، لو حد حابب يسأل يا شباب سؤال حتى لو بالعربي يعني مفيش مشكلة يسأل وأنا هترجمه على اللي اتقال في الفترة اللي فاتت دي. أو حتى لو حد حابب يعني يسأل سؤال بخصوص بخصوص الأكاديميك اكسبيرينس بتاعتي. تمام. Okay, يلا. There was some questions in the form that we put in the announcement group. Would you like to take some of them?
Sure. Yeah, whatever questions you can share the form with me, or you can just drop them in the chat, whatever works.
Okay, I have the form open with me. So someone was asking about the journals for high schoolers like us to submit our researches in. What could it be? Because most of journals need some money to publish scientific researches in it. So is there any other popular journals and trusted journals to submit our papers in it?
Yeah, good question. So you're right. Most journals are very expensive to submit to because they're primarily for well-established scientists, people who already have their degree, they already work in a lab, things like that. I know there are some journals that maybe high schoolers or young students can submit to. Off the top of my head, I don't know the names of them, but I'll look into it and I'll drop the link in the WhatsApp or something if I can find them. But I wouldn't worry too much about publishing research. If you just write a paper, that's great for applications. They love to see that. Most schools understand that high schoolers can't publish research. It's very difficult. It's not something that's common. So it looks cool if you do publish, but don't worry too much if you can't find a journal or anything to submit to, because schools understand that that's very rare.
Okay, there is someone in the chat asking about the master in neuroscience. Can someone do master while he is still undergraduate in medical school?
Yeah, so a master's degree is a 2-year, sometimes 1-year degree, and you usually have to have an undergraduate degree first. So what a lot of people do is they will go get their 4-year undergrad degree, and then they might go get their master's, and then they'll go to medical school. Masters are not required for medical school. Some people just do it to improve their application. But there might be a special program somewhere that lets you get your master's at the same time as your undergrad degree, but that's pretty rare. Usually you have to get one first before you get your master's. Good question.
Okay. Okay, someone was asking, okay, he's now asking about neurosurgery.
Yeah, neurosurgery is even farther down the line. So if you want to be a neurosurgeon, at least in America, our process is quite long, but you have to go get a 4-year undergrad degree, and then you have to go to 4 years of medical school. And then you have to do what's called a residency, which is basically just being a beginner doctor in whatever specific discipline you want. So if you want to be a neurosurgeon, you would choose a neurosurgery residency, and those can take anywhere from 7 to 10 years. So it's going to take from undergrad to becoming a surgeon probably 15 years. It's quite a process, but residents do get paid, so it's a job. You don't have to come out of pocket for that.
I have a question. How do you make your in publications for graphs, do you make it how do you make them? Do you use Excel or R or Matplotlib and Python?
Yeah, great question. You can use, there's not specific rules, at least that I'm aware of what you can use. So if all you know how to use is Excel, that should be fine. My lab uses Python. I think Coby uses MATLAB. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever you're comfortable with. If you know how to code already and you can use all those softwares, that's fantastic. Definitely use what you're comfortable with. I actually don't know how to code. My supervisor has to help me with all of the graphs, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. Great question.
Thank you.
Okay. Someone was asking about, is it preferred to publish or as a high schoolers in colleges, journals, or high school journals?
Yeah, so as I kind of mentioned, very rare for high schoolers to publish anything. I don't think I know anybody who published in high school. Out of all of my neuroscience friends, nobody published in high school. A lot of people don't even publish in college, so don't worry too much about that. If you do have the opportunity, if you do find a high school journal and you get published, great. That looks great on applications, but that's definitely not the expectation. They're not going to be looking for publications on your college application.
Okay. Regarding neuroscience, someone was asking about, he is interested in technology, and at the same time he is interested also in neuroscience. How he can or he or she combine those passion?
Yeah, great question. Coby is actually a great person to talk to about that because he is also a neuroscience major, but he is really interested in neuroengineering and kind of the coding and electronics and devices behind that. But neuroscience is a very diverse field. There's a lot of different sub areas within neuroscience. So I work with cells and pain and medications, developing new drugs for things. Coby, on the other hand, is actually working on a project developing a new technology. So he's kind of in the biotech area. But I would say no matter what interest you have, even if it's not neuroscience specifically, there's definitely a way to combine it with neuroscience.
Okay, that's great. Some people in the chat and also in the forum was asking about what can they do if they wanted to study neuroscience from the beginning. What books you recommend them, and how can they start?
Yeah, good question. So there are places that have free neuroscience courses for people who are just interested. I actually found one the other day. I don't remember the title, but I will look all of these up and I will make a document and send them to you guys. But there's a lot of online resources where you can go take neuroscience classes. They have courses where you can get like a certificate at the end. You could try to find like a local university that has a neuroscience class. I would say that's probably harder, more paperwork involved, and it might be more expensive. So I think online is probably a good option, but I will find those websites for you guys and send them later. I'm looking at the chat. We must join. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool summer programs for high schoolers if you're interested in research. I actually have a document with a ton of them listed. I can find that in a few minutes. I don't know much about summer programs in any other countries. I only know about the American ones, sorry. But a lot of universities will host like camps where you can come and stay for 6 weeks or 10 weeks, or there's different lengths, and they will let you work in one of the labs. UCLA has a 6-week one where you can apply. I do think you have to pay. I don't know how much it costs, but they will come let you work with one of our scientists. And I think usually they let you do a presentation at the end. So summer programs are cool, but again, not required, not the expectation. If you don't do one, it'll be just fine. To do a research paper. Yeah, if you want to write an actual study or like an actual experiment research paper, you are probably going to need to be in some sort of lab, just because I can't imagine you have lab equipment at your house.
Okay. Regarding the form again, someone was asking about the medical schools, there are many, asking about medical schools scholarship. Is it easy? Is it hard? What are the requirements for it?
Yeah, so I don't know a ton about medical school because I'm not a medical student, but there are a lot of programs, again, at least in the United States. I don't know about international programs, but there are places where you can get scholarships. They'll give you money to help you out with tuition. There's actually some schools that are completely free. UCLA is actually completely free. If you get into the medical school, they will pay all of your tuition for you. I know New York University, NYU is also free. So those programs are obviously more competitive because people want the free tuition. But there are a lot of scholarships you can apply for, even if it's an outside company or an outside scholarship entity. Yeah, I have a lot of documents I can send you guys later. I'll pass them along and hopefully they can put in the WhatsApp. But don't worry, I promise I'll find the links for everything.
Okay. Other people was asking about how can they make their application perfect for probably they are asking for research colleges or universities. How can they make their application perfect? What can make it strong? And also, like, maybe we can take some notes on neuroscience applications.
Sure. Yeah. So when you're applying for an undergraduate degree, it's good to know that you're interested in neuroscience, but again, schools are not expecting you to have a ton of research experience. If you do, fantastic. That will only help your application, but it's not the expectation. In order to make yourself a good candidate for any of these research schools, I would say make sure you have good grades in your classes, especially your science classes. Those are the important ones to have good grades in. And I would also say that extracurricular activities are good too. So if you're involved with community service, if you play any sports, things like that, your activities don't have to be all neuroscience related. In fact, it's probably better if they're not neuroscience related because schools want people who are well-rounded, who have a lot of different interests. So they might choose somebody who has a bunch of different hobbies and clubs over somebody who just does neuroscience because they want people who have a lot of interests. I see in the chat there's a very specific question about organ transplantation. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about that. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a better answer, but that's not my experience. Sorry about that.
Okay. I think if someone want to ask anything. I think that's it. Thanks, Ella, for today's session. Guys, I just wanted to say for people who wanted to begin their neuroscience journey, soon we will announce on our own competition, international competition on neuroscience. We will have a study guide from the beginning. If you didn't even read anything about neuroscience, don't know anything about even action potential, you will enjoy this journey even if you didn't make it to a high place or something. And I'm sure that you all will enjoy this journey. in Arabic. للناس اللي حابه لسه تبدا في النيو ساينس، ان شاء الله في الوقت القريب احنا هنعلن عن المسابقه الخاصه بينا، مسابقه انترناشونال، وهتبقى فيها ستادي جايد احنا شخصيا هنتابع معاكم فيها عشان الناس اللي حابه تبدا من البدايه خالص. وباذن الله يعني حتى لو انت ما حققتش فيها مركز فانت هتستفيد فيها بحيث ان انت تبدا ان انت تتعرف في طريق البدايه ليك في النيو ساينس، هتبدا تاخد فكره عامه عن المجال، ولو انت تاهلت المراحل اللي هي المتقدمه هتاخد طبعا كل ما قدمت كل ما هتاخد حاجات اعلى بحيث ان انت تبقى عندك معلومات اكتر. Okay, thanks Ella. I think that's it because it will close in just 4 minutes and we'll take our break now.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good luck with your papers.
هناخد بريك يا شباب، وهيبقى معانا في الجزء الثاني ان شاء الله كوبي هيتكلم معانا عن طريقه الكتابه، وهيبقى فيه برضه في اخر السيشن Q&A للي حابب يسال برضه اسئله، لان لسه في اسئله هتتسال، ما كملناش كل الاسئله. وكمان عشان الجزء بتاع التكنولوجي بما ان كوبي ليه في المجال ده. شكرا لكم. هناخد بريك، هقول لكم مدته قد ايه، بس غالبا ما بين 10 دقايق وربع ساعه، يعني هقول لكم المده بتاعتها الجروب. شكرا لكم كلكم، واشوفكم بعد البريك.
Hello, everybody. So it looks like we have enough people to start. Can everybody hear me? If I can get some confirmation in the chat that you guys can hear me and see my presentation on the screen. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So I'll just get started. Today I'm going to be talking about how to write a literature review. This is perfect timing because, excuse me, I am actually writing a literature review for one of my finals in a class that I'm taking called Brain Architecture. So perfect timing. Let's get right into it. First, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I am a student at UCLA. I'm graduating next week, actually. I'm very excited. I'm a neuroscience major, and I am on the UCLA snowboarding team. We do about 6 competitions a year. Me and a couple of my buddies and I, we traveled to Vermont, New York State, to compete in the national championships this year, and we got 3rd place. It was a really fun time. And I also am an active researcher. I study neuropharmacology. And I enjoy the outdoors. I love going on hikes. I know LA is not the best place for that, but I find the time to go outside here and there. All right. So in a literature review, you will need an abstract or a background / introduction section where you will give a summary of your paper. You will have a body, you will have a discussion, and you will have figures. So in the abstract, I'm going to dive much deeper into all of these, but in the abstract, basically you first will have a couple of introductory statements. You want to be able to hook people in and get them interested. And then you will be talking about the overall background of your topic of choice. And then you will kind of dive a little bit deeper into what you will actually be discussing in the paper. In the body, that's where the actual review is. You will have to have a handful of main topics that you will outline in the abstract, and then you will dive deep into them in the body. And in the discussion, you will give your own little opinions. You'll talk about the subject as a whole, and you can maybe you can also start speaking in the first person here. And basically, you have to discuss why the reader should care. And then you will have figures on separate pages. So I'll get into all of these a little bit deeper now. Okay, so in the abstract, this will come after the title. So you will have your own title page. This is going to have some unique title that basically captures the audience's attention. And then on a separate page, you'll have an abstract. This is going to be ideally single-spaced. It will not contain any citations. It also shouldn't be labeled as abstract. In a review paper, you're never going to label any of your sections. So it's basically just a free-form essay format. This should also not be numbered, and it'll end with a clear statement, which is basically saying what the review is going to cover. It's almost like a thesis statement, the way that I look at it. It's going to be 1 to 2 sentences, and basically you're going to say, here we will review this, and this is important because of that. So here's an example. We will review the interaction of theory and simulation using examples of top-down and bottom-up studies and point to some current developments in the fields of computational and theoretical neuroscience. That was actually directly taken from an actual review paper, which I cited below. So in the abstract or the background section, you want to have a topic sentence that can really get people interested in your paper. So this should be captivating, it should hook the audience, and it should emphasize the relevance to the audience. And the audience is going to be professionals who have mastered your field. You should always be assuming that those who are reading your paper know all about that field and are experts in each individual subject. However, you're basically giving them a grand overview so they don't have to read a dozen other articles that you've read for them. So you want to make sure to call to attention. This is basically saying, okay, this is really important. Here's why. And you want to make it easy for the reader to relate to this. And in the topic sentence, yeah, it should be short. It should be to the point, and it should really get your point across immediately. So, any questions about the abstract or introductory section? I just want to make sure that that was all clear. Okay, I'll dive right into the body then. It should be about 1,000 words per paragraph, but in my opinion, I don't really like to have any sort of um, like limitations on what my paragraph should look like. I think that you should have a topic, a main topic of discussion for each body paragraph, and I think that you should basically take however many words that you need, as long as the body paragraphs are relatively the same size. And if you have a larger topic, you can maybe even split that topic into 2 body paragraphs if needed. That's totally okay. So in the body, you basically want to tell a whole story about the topic. Um, you're trying to convey something to the audience that they should care about, and each individual paragraph, including the introduction all the way to the conclusion, should have a nice flow to it. And you want to utilize the recent findings in the field, focus on one specific field throughout the paper. I'm going to give you guys an example of all this because I basically made an outline for my review paper yesterday, and I can share my screen and share that in a little bit. But yeah, basically discussed all this. Your audience is going to be scientists who have mastered the discipline. Your paper should contain no headings. You're not going to say body, paragraph, blah. You're not going to say conclusion, discussion. No, it should all just flow right there on the page. And never forget, you should always be using topic sentences in each one of your body paragraphs. This is going to guide the reader so they know what they're getting into for each body paragraph. And you want to have transition sentences at the very end of your body paragraphs to introduce the next topic of discussion in the following body paragraph. So in the body, you're going to briefly introduce the main problem or the topic of discussion for that body paragraph as it relates to non-scientists, and then you're going to narrow it down to have a background for the scientist. So that should be your topic sentence of each body paragraph is going to be pretty simple. I would say that it should be non-scientist is a very vague term, but I would say it shouldn't basically should just not really get into the weeds of things in the very first sentence, but you're going to very quickly narrow it down for the scientists and get into the nitty-gritty in the second or third sentence. And yeah, so most of the paper is going to be the body, and it should really be technical. It should be, yeah, get into the good stuff for most of the paper. That should be 65 to 75% of the paper is going to be the body with all of the really nitty gritty stuff here. And then you want to end with some concluding paragraphs in the body that will sum up the major ideas presented, because I mean, this is an essay, right? You really want to review what you were discussing in the body just to really provide a general flow for the reader and allow them to comprehend and remind them what each body paragraph is saying. Because again, you're trying to tell a story and you're trying to convey a point. Why is your topic so important? Any questions for the body paragraphs? Okay, so moving on to the discussion. So the discussion is, I love the discussion because I kind of get to insert my own opinions, and you really get to, when you're writing one of these papers, you really start to have your own thoughts and opinions throughout the creative process. Um, you might not have a discussion thought out when you're planning the paper, but I guarantee you that when you do the research and then when you start writing your body paragraphs, there's going to be some really cool things that come to your mind, and then you're going to want to put that down on paper in the discussion section. So this is the portion where you're going to be able to connect to the masses. Okay, so right now you're not talking to that one reader that's currently looking at the paper. You're talking to the scientific, the field as a whole here in the discussion section. And here's where you can propose your own thoughts in relation to the problem at hand. So in the discussion, you want to propose explanations for the problem. Basically say, okay, why is this happening? Why is it important? You want to compare and contrast each study. You're going to have a lot of citations throughout the paper, at least 13, 15 citations. And some of them are going to be similar, so you don't have to compare and contrast the studies, but basically there will be some that may negate each other, and you really want to be able to like tie them all in with one another and say, okay, this study says this because of that, that study says that because of that, and you really want to explain why you're using those sources. And here you can relate back to the any hypotheses in the current field and address any limitations in the topic that you're studying. So you're going to summarize some key findings. You're going to talk about those key findings in the body paragraphs, but you really want to just very, very, very briefly summarize those in the discussion section, and then discuss the implications of those. The implications, I love this section because you can really get creative here. And basically you can discuss, okay, so this topic is important because if we studied it more, if we found some cures, or it developed further technology based upon this, it can mean blank for the public. You can really go wild here. Talk about futurology, potential cures, etc. So you're also going to be highlighting novelty and significance in the discussion. Basically, well, why is this topic so unique? Why is it important? Why should we be funding more research? That's going to be a big thing too. All this research needs to get funded somehow, and these review papers are a great way in conveying to the public that this topic needs more funding, and we should dive more into researching it. And that ties directly into future direction. So you can imagine what would happen if we spent more time researching this, and where could the field go next? What are some things that you can imagine happening in the field in anywhere from 5 to 50 years? So any question for the discussion section? I know I'm talking fast, so I apologize. Perfect. All right, I'll move on to the figures now. So this is a unique section because it's going to be kind of separate from the main review. Basically, you're going to have figures that will be, yes, the pictures with 1,000 words, and this is going to be separate from the main review. It's not going to be embedded into the body. I've always been taught to have your figures separate. Each individual figure should have its own page with a caption underneath the figure. and the caption should be containing basically just a description of what you're seeing right there on the screen. And you should at least have 2 to 3 computer generated images. I like using a website. I'll share it with you. I think it's called BioRender.com. In the chat there, I believe that's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Basically, computer generated image, it means no drawing. Okay, even if you have a tablet, a computer generated image is something that you either have from a paper. You can use figures from other papers, and you can make sure, of course, if you cite it, and you should have your own unique caption there. You should not just take the figure caption from the paper. Or you can create your own computer generated image using a website like BioRender, which I shared in the chat. That's very useful because yeah, pictures with 1,000 words, you can really describe what you're discussing in the picture. And I'll show you some examples of a computer generated image that I made last week. So yeah, only really include figures when they're relevant. You don't want to just create 2 to 3 at minimum figures like just cause, okay, like it really should be something important. So yeah, make sure that your figures are significant and you're not just wasting people's time looking at those figures or using a paper space. So a figure has to be some sort of, you can have a wider range of things. So it could be some complex topic and mechanism that's much better when visualized rather than described as text, or it can be some sort of pathway, some sort of like a signaling pathway, for example, some sort of signaling cascade, or some like a model, maybe like a computer generated model if you're doing like a computer science, like a modeling topic, for example, like protein folding. You can have the pictures of your models in the paper. And you really want to include those references in the caption if they're appropriate, because you can outsource your knowledge from the figures. You can still use other people's work in those captions, but yes, you have to make sure that you cite those sources. And so your figures can come from a source, but like I said earlier, you want to make sure that you create your own unique title and your own unique caption. And you have to make sure that the figure will actually help your reader. Any questions on figures? Okay, so moving on to references, this is pretty simple. Basically, depending on where you're submitting your review article, the references will be laid out in a different format. So it could be APA, MLA. You really just need to ask your professor, or if you're publishing in a journal, you really need to go what is appropriate in the journal guidelines. And you can use other like websites like I don't know, Citation Machine or BibMe. I can put those. I don't know, let's see. You guys might know this already, but there's an example of a website. Oh, okay, we have a question. Sorry. Is there a minimum number of figures that should be put? I'd say so. Earlier, I mentioned that you should have 2 to 3 minimum computer generated images, and those would be images like from BioRender or from other articles. I would say like I said, don't put in figures that the reader doesn't need to see. So if you genuinely have like no figures, or you really don't think that you need a figure, and I kind of doubt that. I feel like figures are really good. You don't have to put it, but I would say 2 to 3 minimum figures would be good. But I feel like you could definitely, it would be pretty difficult to not have over 2 to 3. I feel like when you're writing your paper, you're gonna think of ways where you would like to visually represent a subject. So going back to citations, that's just this is a source that you can use to organize your citations. I don't really use this. I mean, you could. I do a lot of my citations by hand, but I used to use Citation Machine a lot. It's pretty helpful. Um, Another tool that you can use for organizing your figures would be an app like Zotero. I don't know if it's a website as well, but this is an app that I'm currently using right now. I'll share my screen yeah, okay, I'll share my screen right now, showing what Zotero looks like. Let's see if I can. Oh, cool. Let's see. Oh, software update. Hopefully my figure's saved. Let's see. Excuse me, I don't know. Okay, this can work. Oh, I got another question. For a citation, should I first write the review article? So in a citation, you normally don't just put like the link to the article. Normally, what I've done lately, it's a lot of APA format. But yeah, usually recently it's been a lot of APA format for me. And you can use that on like Citation Machine, for example. You can just there's a drop down menu. You can just say, okay, put it in APA format. I would say that's a pretty popular a citation method. But again, you really want to make sure the journals are all very clear what they want, and they won't even accept your article if you don't do what they want. And with your professors as well. Uh, it's pretty. They'll definitely help you out with that. So I think everyone can see my whole screen right now. I hope you can see this, but this is Zotero. This is basically a good tool for organizing sources. So like I mentioned earlier, I just started making my own review paper yesterday. And these are a couple of the sources that I'm using right now. Basically, you can add something like a journal article here. Put the title, the authors. You can add authors if there are multiple, and you don't have to fill out all of this. I usually don't, but an example would be like here. It's a journal article. The title is Neural Networks of the Mouse Neocortex. The author is Brian Zing. I put the DOI because it's a great tool it's like a link basically to that journal article. And that tells you the date added. And then you can also put in notes. So here I have charting the brain's networks, and I have my little note here. I wrote that it's a good summary for connectomics. And yeah, so there's a, yeah, this is a great tool for organizing your sources, because the worst thing ever is when you have your sources, and you kind of just you have your sources, and you forget where they came from. You're citing so much material that you don't remember where you found this information. So I suggest that every time you open a new journal article and a tab on your computer, immediately add that to your list. Whether or not you're going to end up using it, you can write notes saying, okay, maybe I didn't use this, but you never want to lose track of those sources because it's terrible to have to chase them down at the end of the day. Yeah, so that covers my main presentation. And I will show you guys really quick what my summary looks like from my own paper. Let's see. Sure. Okay. I think you guys can see this. Basically, this is totally incomplete. I would not like use this as a full guide. This was just basically some scratch paper I was using yesterday, where I'm writing my own research review article on something called the mesoscale connectome. Basically, I have the background here, and I'm highlighting some significant points that I want to cover. What is the significance of understanding the brain's connections? What is the connectome? What animals models do we know the connectome for? And I'm going into the mesoscale connectome. So in order to discuss the mesoscale connectome, I want to describe what the macro and microscale connectome are. So here I have like a brief summary of each in the individual scale of spatial of the connectome. So I don't know if you can see here, but I have a little citation, but I put a note, no citations allowed in the background. I'm gonna eventually, I will like summarize that and change it a little bit. So I wrote a little thesis statement. That's basically the last statement of my introductory section. And I'm going to describe, okay, what am I talking in this paper? And why is this important? So going into the body paragraphs, yes, I wrote tell a story. Don't forget, you want to make sure that your paper is captivating. So I'm going to go, each one of these numbered sections are each going to have their own individual sections in the body paragraphs. And methodological approaches is definitely going to be the largest section. I might even break this up into multiple I probably will break this up into multiple paragraphs depending on the method used. So for example, I'm going to have a paragraph on tracer studies, a paragraph on diffusion MRI, calcium imaging, optogenetics, tomography, virtual tractography, etc. And those will probably be smaller paragraphs because you could write an entire paper on something like diffusion MRI or calcium imaging. So and then I'll be going into the key findings in the current field right now. That's also going to be a pretty bulky section. This is really important because it is a review paper. You want to tell everybody what's going on in the field, what progress has been made. So this is very important. You want to make sure to really freshen yourself up on the literature and read a lot of papers. And then I'll dive into some comparative studies, applications in current research, challenges and limitations in the field. What's really holding people back right now? Is it software? I don't know. It could be many things. And then future directions for the field. And then I'll go into a little conclusion, and then I'll move on to the discussion. Here I basically just wrote some very brief notes of what I want to highlight in the discussion. And then I'm gonna put some figures. So I don't have any yet, but I will. So that's my little outline there. Oh, there's a question asking, is there a limit to articles to reference? No limit. You can reference as many articles as you want. It's better to reference more than to reference not enough, I would say. So do not be shy to reference as many as you want. Let's see. I can pull up a little computer generated image that I made last week for, this was not for, let's see, first I'm gonna grab this. Any questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat as well.
ترانسليت لو حد حابب يسأل سؤال أو حاجة feel free إن أنتوا تحطوا الأسئلة في الشات.
Let's see.
Okay, this month we have some questions from the forum. Do you want to
Okay.
like answer?
So you guys can see my screen.
Okay.
This is
okay.
not for. Why is this working?
And the first part of the presentation with Ella.
Question: is a table considered as a figure? I would say you should definitely check with your professor or the journal, the publisher. That's a really good question. A lot of times tables are not considered as figures, but I would treat tables as you would a figure, in that you don't want to embed them into the main body. You want to have join it, maybe put the table immediately after your review paper before the figures. You can have your own section, just like tables, on like a like title page saying tables, and then you can put the table right there. And then after that, figures. But I would, in my opinion, I've seen tables not count as figures because they're, it's, yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of a tricky one because at least in a review paper, that table, the data in that table is not, you're not making that data. So I would say it doesn't count as a figure. And also, yeah, if it's really significant to the work, then you definitely want to include it. But I would be careful with tables because sometimes it could just be like too detailed in the figures. You really want to just have like main points. But yeah, if the table is really important for the field, then I would say definitely include it, but it should be in its own section. Let's see.
Okay, in the first part, Ella, there was a person asking about linking between the passion in technology and neuroscience, and she mentioned that you have like experience in that. What do you like to answer about?
I don't know why my computer is not really working right now, but I'm trying to pull up an example of a biorender image. Okay, another question. Do you think that conducting a research independently is a good choice for high schoolers, or seeking mentorship would be a better option? That's a really good question. So I would say, without a doubt, seeking mentorship should always be a priority. There is no reason why you can't do research and have a mentor. So I would say yes, you should always have a mentor. I don't necessarily know if you mean a mentorship as in like researching underneath somebody's like a boss or something like that, somebody who is telling you how to research. But if you mean mentor as in somebody who can guide you and give you networking options, or tell you maybe how you should research, where you should research, definitely always have a mentor. You want to have somebody that you can go to and say, hey, can you look at my my resume, my CV? can you write me a letter of recommendation? You definitely always want to have a mentor. And then conducting research independently. I don't know. I can't tell if somebody's trying to speak right now. I see the little circle highlighting your name, but I can't really hear you. But conducting research independently is a good option depending on what field you're researching in. I know a lot of engineers have great success conducting independent research because you can really get a lot of the materials that an engineer would need, like robotics and electronics, etc. And that would be a great option. Definitely, if that's the case, do your own personal projects to just bolster your skill set and your resume. However, for somebody like me, doing my own independent research without being in like an official lab would be difficult, simply because I don't have the facilities required for conducting like cellular research in my house. But if you can, if you are like a biology student, then definitely you can, and you're in high school, so there's no harm in asking your local like some university around you or some researcher, some company that's doing research. There's no harm in asking if you can help out, be a lab assistant. Another question: are there any online programs or internships related to neuroscience? Online programs, I would say maybe not official. Maybe there's not an official online like a neuroscience program, not that I'm aware of. However, um, I would say that you can definitely, it depends on like the area of neuroscience, but eventually you will have to learn how to do some programming, and you can definitely learn. There's definitely online classes and programs for programming. You can like learning like programs like MATLAB, for example, or like Python, and learning those would be really, really, really useful to you. So you can use something like Coursera, which basically is like online classes, or Leet Code to teach you how to program. And basically, these would be good to learn how to do things like neural signal processing, which relates to the next question. In the first part, there's a person asking about the ability to link technology and neuroscience. So how can that be possible to study? I would like to hear about Neuralink in addition to that. Perfect. So that is exactly what I'm going to be diving into after I graduate, and I've taken multiple classes on that. So learning those skills that I mentioned just now, MATLAB, Python, and neural signal processing are very, very important for that. And just getting your math good, you definitely want to take a good amount of math classes for that, as in addition to your biology classes. So that might take some extra effort to put in those classes that are not necessarily required for graduation. You might just have to take math classes and computer science classes in addition to your regular neuroscience coursework. So the ability to link technology and neuroscience, yeah, so that's a field that's exploding right now. So that's like basically those are called brain computer or brain machine interfaces. So brain computer brain machine interfaces, that's the link between some type of technology in the brain, and that could be anything ranging from like deep, let's say, or like a regular EEG, or it could be a neural prosthetic, or like a deep brain stimulation. Those are all things that people use for brain-machine interfaces. In Neuralink, they use depth electrodes, I believe, unless they changed it. And basically, brain-machine, brain-computer interface is like a two-way system where you can both record and stimulate the brain. And right now, Neuralink is only in the phase, at least publicly, they're only in the phase where they are recording the brain, and they're basically taking those neural signals and taking them and using them to control an external device. But in the future, they're planning on doing things like spinal implants, where they can then record from the brain the intention of the movement from the motor cortex, and then they can stimulate the spinal cord. So yeah, two-way system. I would love to go more into that if you have more questions about brain-machine interfaces. Another question for him: how do you come up with a research question? Well, in a review article, you don't need to come up with a research question because you're addressing the field as it is currently. And I would say if you're doing research and you're trying to find a research question, I would say if you catch up on the current literature and you just read a lot of those articles of like where your field is at, you will easily be able to identify the gaps in knowledge, and your research question could stem from that. A lot of times articles say, hey, like we have this, we've discovered this, but unfortunately, this is still a limitation. So that's an easy way to find the research question. Or if you're knowledgeable on the topic and you've read up, then your curiosity may spike and you might say, hey, what if we try this? That would be really cool. So that's what's one of the beauties of science, is you can really be creative. Let's see, any questions? What are the best universities for neuroscience and medicine in the USA to consider on the college list? Okay, neuroscience, definitely. Let's see, I'll type in the chat. UCLA. I mean, I'm biased, but I go here. Let's see, MIT, Stanford, University of Southern California, which is USC. Caltech, University. Oh, there's a lot. Let's see, University of Washington in St. Louis. University Washington in Washington. Man, there's a lot. Duke is great. University of Michigan is great. There's a whole lot, honestly. Let's see. I'm just gonna put ... Those are just a few, but I can definitely make a more exhaustive list if you would like. I can send it over to you. Let's see. Third question, if we go forward, maybe questions. How do you evaluate the credibility? Oh, how do you evaluate the credibility of resources? That's a really good question. Normally, if you get your resource from a high quality journal, then the resource is definitely going to be credible. So there are many journals that you can publish a paper in. A journal is basically just the host of the paper, and each journal has their own policies and their own levels or their own criteria of how to get published in that journal. And some are more stringent than others, some are more reputable than others. So if you get a research paper, a source from a thing like a journal like Cell Press Journal, Press, Cell Press Journal or Nature, those are definitely going to be the most credible sources. However, another thing that you could do is you can, depending on where you find that source, what website you get it from, you can see how many citations the paper has. And typically, the more citations a paper has, the more reputable it is. I was just doing this yesterday. So that's a great way to see what papers are good, is like how many people have referenced the paper in their journal or in their paper. Oh, another good way is say that you find a paper in the Cell Press Journal or Nature. A good way to find more sources is to look at who they sourced. So go to a paper and you scroll down all the way to the bottom to the references, and I guarantee you that those sources that the Cell Press or Nature journal cited, those are definitely going to be high quality sources. Are there any online summer programs? A full ride bachelor scholarship, making a review article in a reputable journal, or publishing a new research paper. I would say if you want a scholarship, a review article probably would not cut it. Review articles are kind of made all the time, and you're not really doing your own research. You're kind of just summarizing things. So I'm not really familiar on getting scholarships based upon research. But I mean, if you're deciding between writing a review article or publishing a new research paper, definitely publishing a new research paper would be the way to go. And obviously, the better the journal, the publisher, the better the paper is going to be, and the better it will be taken by the public. I hear that. Okay, so this question is, I heard that to study neuroscience, I have to first join biological sciences section in the uni before choosing neuroscience as a specialty. Is that correct? Or can we join neuroscience section directly? That fully depends on the university. A lot of times universities, they'll have things like a pre-major, so like pre-neuroscience, or like pre-molecular biology. Basically, that is just make sure you take the lower division classes. So there are upper division classes and lower division classes. Normally your lower division classes are in the first 2 years, upper division classes are in the second 2 years. And all of the biology majors, so like molecular biology, neuroscience, immunology, those are likely going to have all of the same lower division courses, because you need to have that general biology understanding. So that would be like for pre-neuroscience, you're just going to be taking that regular biology series, the regular biology science section. And if your GPA is good enough, then they will let you into the neuroscience program. But that's how it works at UCLA. That's how it works at a lot of universities in California. I'm not sure how they all work. It really depends on the school. But yeah, sometimes you can join in directly as a neuroscience major, but other times you're going to have to be like pre-neuroscience and just kind of prove that you have what it takes. Okay. Can I take neuroscience as a hobby besides my major? I'm majoring in engineering, but I want to study neuroscience when I become free. Yeah, totally. I have a ton of I know a ton of people who do that. Um, I would say the best way to do that is to join clubs, neuroscience clubs or neurotechnology clubs on campus. So, for example, I'm part of a club. It's Neurotechnology Club, and it's fully separate from my classes. It's just as a hobby. And a lot of engineers, a lot of electrical engineers, a lot of computer scientists are in this neurotechnology club because we all have shared interest for neuroscience, and they can use their expertise in that club for things like brain-computer interfaces. Yeah, so you can most definitely take neuroscience as a hobby. If you want a minor in neuroscience, you can do that as well. So your major can be an engineering major, and you can have a neuroscience minor. That just means you're going to have to take more coursework. Um, and that's a little bit more committed than joining a club, but I would say joining a club is definitely the way to go. Or you can just, yeah, you likely won't be allowed to take random neuroscience classes in your university because they try to save those for the neuroscience majors. But yeah, join a club. It's definitely the way to go. How do I make connections as I intend to work in academic position related to medicine in USA? I would say just send a lot of emails, get your LinkedIn profile going, and yeah, sending a lot of emails is honestly the way to go. If you know anybody who's familiar with um, people who work at a university, then and they know somebody who is interested in helping high school students, like mentoring, definitely that would be the way to go. It's a lot of just about networking. And I think you're naturally going to, if you work in a research lab, which you should volunteer in a research lab in your university. Those your mentors and your your principal investigator will likely hope that maybe have uh, connections and collaborators in the United States on their research. So if they have collaborators in the United States, then you can definitely um, yeah, make network that way. How can I publish a paper for free in a good journal? Any tips that matter? I don't really know. So I have never personally published a paper in a journal myself. Usually that's something that the principal investigator of the lab does. So unfortunately, I'm not a reliable source to answer that. I apologize. But if there's any more questions, okay, is it possible to work on a paper remotely or take part in research to be published from my home country? Yeah, it's definitely possible to work on a paper remotely. So the thing is you need to be published, to have your name as an author on a paper, you need to significantly contribute to the research. And of course, it's a lot more difficult when you're remote, especially for things like cellular research, or like animal related research. Um, I would say the best thing that you could do is if you're really good at programming and coding, um, and you somehow make those connections and you can tell them to like that you can work on their data. Um, but that is difficult because a lot of times these universities they have strict security, and they will not allow you to even have the data. Um, like I work with cells all the time, and I'm not even allowed to have my own data that I procured on my computer and take it home with me. Everything needs to stay in the laboratory on campus because it's very strict. Any more questions? Okay, I'll quickly just show you an example of a computer-generated image on BioRender before I head out. So this is what BioRender looks like. Here's an example of something I did a couple of years ago. So I took part of this from a research paper, and then I made this part. Let's see, here's a better example. I made this one last week. Basically, this is an explanation of transfection. It's basically where you hijack the cellular machinery to produce the DNA to make proteins of your choice with introduced DNA. So basically, just give a little visual representation of what that would look like. These are the proteins that I was making in my lab. And yeah, just a nice little visual representation. Any online neuroscience classes? I would say it's best not to just take an online neuroscience class. I think the best thing that you could do is just read a neuroscience textbook. I don't really know of any online classes, but I have textbooks that I was assigned to read in my classes that my classes were based on. So reading a textbook is definitely the best thing you could ever do for your knowledge. I can share an example of a textbook right here. Let's see. All right. An example would be I have a couple. Let's see. Okay, I'm just copying these straight from my computer, so there's a bunch of underscores, but you can just ignore that. It's pretty easy to see the name there. Definitely read textbooks. Those are the best way for you to learn. Okay. What projects could be not related to neuroscientists? As a hobby, I would say without a lab is difficult, but learn how to do MATLAB first. It's not that difficult. You can watch some YouTube videos, or you can read that textbook I sent. Oops, that's supposed to say MATLAB. And then there are a bunch of online databases of just EEG data. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can find some on GitHub. EEG, LFP. Oh, so MATLAB is actually, it requires a license. I didn't even realize that. So maybe you can also use Python, honestly. The field is going towards Python anyhow. Okay. So yeah, processing neural data is a good idea. And what that means, it's kind of complicated, but basically it's just like learn basic neural signal processing. So like oh, interesting. I've never heard of GNU Octave, but that's great. That's great. Any more questions? Okay, I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for sticking around and tuning in. If you guys have any more questions, I'm in a WhatsApp of with the heads of your organization. So let me know. Thank you so much. Wish you all the best of luck. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, you can also ask, follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll follow you, of course. It's always good to have a network of people. Let me send you guys my information. 1 second. It's asking me to do an email verification. I don't really know how to do this. I think this. All right. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Ask me any questions you'd like. Have a great rest of your days. Thank you so much.